This episode is brought to you by Vital Farms. Isn't it bullshit to have to question where your food comes from? At Vital Farms, you can trace your pasture-raised eggs all the way back to the source, the pasture. On the side of each pasture-raised carton of eggs, you'll find the name of the farm where your eggs were laid. And when you look the farm up on their website, you'll get a peek at all the sunshine, fresh air, and open space the hens enjoy. Learn more and find out where to buy them at vitalfarms.com. Vital Farms, keeping it bullshit-free.
'Tis the season to shine with H&M. Discover the holiday collection and find fashionable pieces for your wardrobe or for under the tree. Get inspired and dazzle with this year's glam. From tuxedo styles, bow detailed pieces, impressive prints, and more. From unforgettable looks to unforgettable gifts. With fashion finds to home decor, find it all at H&M. Treat your loved ones and yourself this season. Shop in-store or at hm.com.
This episode is brought to you by Klaviyo, the platform that powers smarter digital relationships. With Klaviyo, you can activate all your customer data in real time, connect seamlessly with your customers across all channels, guide your marketing strategy with AI-powered insights, recommendations, and automated assistance, deliver experiences that feel individually designed at scale, and grow your business faster. Power smarter digital relationships with Klaviyo. Learn more at klaviyo.com/Spotify. That's KLAVIYO.com/Spotify.
LinkedIn presents.
Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast? Enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page, and please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Solange Charas and Stela Lupushor about HR and the future of work and skills-based versus credential-based hiring. Solange Charas and Stela Lupushor, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thrilled to be here.
Thank you for having us back.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you back. I'm trying to remember, it was maybe 4 to 6 months ago that we had you on last time. We had a chance to talk about your new book, which was a fabulous conversation. Today, we're going to continue that conversation. We're going to talk about HR and the future of work, more specifically around skill-based versus credential-based hiring in the workforce and as we move into the future of work. As we get started, I wanted to share Solange and Stela's bio with everybody. Solange Charas is the founder and CEO of HC Moneyball, an adjunct professor and governance researcher and thought leader. Stela Lupushor is a thought leader, speaker, educator, and futurist on a mission to humanize the workplace through the use of design thinking, technology, analytics, and future thinking to create inclusive workplaces. And I could say way more about both of you, but I'm going to pause there and just give you both a chance to share anything else about yourself, your background, your personal context that you would like to highlight for the audience.
I will start with the fact that we both teach. We both teach in higher institutions. So the topic of today's conversation, I think it's very relevant, not only professionally from a HR perspective, but professionally as educators as well. So looking forward to diving in.
Between Stela and myself, we teach at 4 different institutions, or you teach also at Cornell, so 5 different institutions. So we sort of have our pulse on the industry, the higher education industry.
Yeah, wonderful. And I don't know if you remember, but I'm a university professor. That's my full-time gig, and I do consulting work on the side. So I think between the 3 of us, we have a lot of knowledge and insight and experience in both higher ed and in the workplace in the consulting space. So I think this will be a great conversation. I'm excited to hear your thoughts around work, the future of work and skills-based versus credential-based hiring. So why don't we start by defining those a little bit? What do you mean by skills-based work versus credential-based work, or sorry, credential-based hiring and skills-based hiring?
Yeah, so organizations, and we're sort of jumping into the middle, so let me just give a little sentence and then let's back out a little bit to create a context to understand what we're thinking about in this conversation. Today's challenge for most organizations, and if you look at the CEO survey on top issues that the conference board does every year, talent is amongst the top 5. And if you look, talent acquisition, and if you look at the CHRO survey that the conference board does every year, across the globe, talent acquisition is the number 1 topic. So companies are really struggling with finding talent. And we think that one of the reasons that they're having difficulty finding talent is because of the criteria that they set in place for their screening. So what happens is we've got structural unemployment. So even though our unemployment rate is very low, the majority of that unemployment is structural unemployment. So there's essentially 3 different types of unemployment. There's frictional unemployment, which is basically unemployment of people that are in the midst of changing jobs. So it's just the frictional part, going from one job to another. There's seasonal or cyclical unemployment, which is attached to business cycles. So we see, gig or seasonal or cyclical workers around Christmas time. So people always, salespeople find it easier to find a job when companies are hiring for seasonal work. And then the third one is structural unemployment. And structural unemployment refers to the mismatch between the jobs that are available and the skill levels of the unemployed. And it is the one that is the most persistent. We can't wait for time to fix that problem. We actually have to have some type of an intervention to solve it. So unlike cyclical unemployment, it's not a business cycle issue. We have about 10.5 million or so open jobs and about 6 million people that are on the unemployment roster. We have more unemployed that have just given up looking for a job because they simply can't find one.
It's important to note the only people that count towards the official unemployment numbers are the people who are actively looking, right?
Right, exactly. And if you look at the BLS data and you look at the research in this area, structural unemployment really comprises the vast majority of the reason for unemployment. So think about the tech sector layoffs. Tens of thousands of employees are now unemployed, and yet the unemployment rate didn't go up during this period, during these last 6 months, when the tech industry was shedding jobs, for a couple of reasons. One is the tech sector actually overhired in the prior 2 years, so they're actually getting rid of excess labor. And people in those jobs, for the most part, were able to find new jobs because it's not just the Googles and the Metas in the world that are hiring tech people. It's all the mid and small size companies that are hiring tech people that have
everyone is.
That have been locked into those behemoths. And when they let them go, I actually think it's a good thing because now we're doing technology transfer from the Googles and the Metas and the Yahoos of the world and the Apples of the world into our mid and small cap companies. So I think that's a good thing. But structural unemployment is really harmful to the economy because as industries evolve and the requirement for competencies grow, the skill gap widens. And it also increases U.S. income inequality, which we'll get to in a second. So we are really interested in this dilemma that organizations say they can't find talent. And, we started off by saying skills-based versus credential-based. And what most organizations do, for good, for better, or for worse, is for pretty much, I'd say, I'd throw a guess out there, 70% of entry-level jobs, forget about the mid-level manager and executive, they set a standard of having a college degree to do the job. And I'm not going to take Stela's words away from her, but she'll get to that in a second. Roughly 60% of all job openings require at least some college, with approximately 30% of the openings requiring a bachelor's degree. We're calling this the diploma ceiling. And I actually Googled diploma ceiling and couldn't find anything. So maybe this is original for us.
You've coined a new term. Wonderful.
You've coined a new term, the diploma ceiling. So what's really interesting is that according to the BLS data, there are as many people in the labor force over 25 years of age with high school diplomas as there are with people with college degrees. So the numbers are 23.6 and 23.7% respectively. So these two groups, the high school diploma and the college diploma, or the degree, are actually the same size. And if you combine high school and some college, the number goes up to 43.8%. So about 44% of the workforce has a high school diploma and some college. And it's incredibly close to the percent of the workforce that is considered a low and moderate income earner, or an LMI, which is at about 54%. So about 54% of our workforce is considered a low or moderate income earner. That's the majority. And those LMIs are around, they're at the poverty level or slightly above the poverty level, but certainly not in a position to improve their economic conditions. So what we're thinking around this is that companies are actually perpetuating poverty in the United States because they're forcing people to get a college degree to do jobs that may not need college degrees. And the college education since 1980, since when I got my degree, so I went to UC Berkeley, and it cost me about $720 a year for my tuition. I just looked at the UC Berkeley website, and for an in-state, because I was in-state, it cost $9,594 in tuition. That's not cost of books, anything else. That's a 1,332% increase in tuition, and the marginal improvement in your earnings between 1980 and today is not 1,332%.
You've highlighted some really great elements there around structural unemployment, just the makeup of the labor market, and the way that organizations often they artificially limit and reduce the size of the pool of potential people to apply for positions. Stela, I wanted to give you a chance to jump in and see if there's any additional insights you want to provide in response to Solange.
Hand it over to her.
Absolutely. And when we think about the labor market and the fact that it's a very interesting time for economists, right? Because usually you would see when there are layoffs, when we're heading towards recession, labor market follows and there is a growth in unemployment. But we are dealing with an environment where a lot of people left the labor market. We have a big proportion of baby boomers who chose to retire, or some who retired early. We have just lost a lot of people, like 900,000 working age population who died and are no longer available to be employed. We have a significant number of people, younger generations, who have decided to pursue independent solopreneur, gig employment. So the traditional employment that economists care about, it just doesn't have enough people to tap into. So organizations have to be creative about how they rethink the talent pools, how they rethink the barriers to good employment and what constitutes good employment. So when we start with the opportunities companies can tap into, right, first of all, you need to think, what is the work that needs to get done? What are the activities, the essence? Because no longer job descriptions would address everything that is required. And many times job description is used to parse people out, as opposed to saying, how can we get them in for whatever, maybe 60, 70, 80% of what is required based on that job description. And then the rest of it could be something that can be developed on the job, something that will change anyway, right. Something that we can use this as an opportunity for people to feel they have a space to grow, as opposed to, if they've done everything that's required by the job, they're not going to be interested in that job in the first place, or it will not give them a sense of growth and development. The other opportunities now, with advent of all of the technological innovations, there is really time to rethink the activities that people do. And yes, everybody talks about ChatGPT and all of the disruption that will have on knowledge work. But that's a good thing, because it'll augment, and you can outsource repetitive activities. You can leave the human work for humans. And it's an impetus for organizations to rethink the workflow, rethink the activities that need to be part of someone's responsibilities. And based on these changes, then we can rethink job descriptions. What do they include? Do we use language that is precluding certain candidates from applying? Do we say, credential is required, for your credential is required? Do we say, maybe for your credential, not required, but desirable? Because all of these little signals are going to be interpreted very black and white by the algorithm that assess candidates. And inevitably, you're going to end up with a significantly smaller and less diverse talent pool as a result of doing those automatic classifications. And then,
can I double click on that for just a second? Yes. There's a lot of reasons why this is a hard thing for the economy generally, for society generally, but for organizations specifically. But you just highlighted, you just mentioned, I want to highlight the diversity, equity, and inclusion component here.
Yeah.
How often do we artificially limit the pool of candidates that disproportionately benefits certain groups and disproportionately negatively benefit or negatively takes away from other groups? It happens all the time. And so if you're wanting to increase the diversity in your pool, which will then hopefully lead to more diversity in the hiring process and bringing people on and the types of inclusive and belonging environments and cultures that exist within organizations, one of the easy ways, it's not easy, I suppose, but one of the first steps is to just rethink what you're requiring in your job postings, because there is research that shows that men, frankly, don't need to check all the boxes. They'll apply for jobs that they aren't a good fit for at all. But women disproportionately will often feel like, oh, I'm not a candidate. I'm not even going to apply. I'm not going to throw my hat in the ring for something because I'm not as qualified as I should be, even though they're way more qualified than a bunch of men who are applying and eventually will be the ones to get the job.
Exactly.
And just to jump in here for a second, we have outsourced to AI and to machine learning the screening process. And that technology is programmed mostly by white guys. So it's not nefarious, it's just hidden bias. And I think that also contributes to the problem. It's not just that the candidate pool isn't big enough, women aren't applying for jobs. It's that when they put their resumes in, it's not even a human being that's looking at the resume. It is machine learning. And that machine was programmed by by white guys. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm just saying that the technology sector is predominantly white male.
And it's trained on the data from the past, which was disproportionately hiring more white dudes, right?
That's right.
Yep.
I love the kind of diversion into the diverse talent pools, because we typically think of diversity as the visual identifiers, right? What's visible as far as race, gender, abilities. But there is a broader spectrum of talent that we can tap into. So once we understand what are the changes to the work, change the job description to reflect that, and then tap into a diverse spectrum of talent options, right? Look at people who recently retired. They already have the knowledge. They know what needs to get done. They understand the culture. Bring them back as contractors to fill in the gaps for specific needs. They will also develop the next generation of leaders and kind of the leadership pipeline. They can coach. They can mentor. Look at people with schedule limitations, right? You have significant number of becoming disproportionately younger set of millennials who are caregivers. They may have chosen to stay home so they can have the ability to care for their parents or family members. Maybe they have several hours in the afternoon. Yes, it's not a full-time job, but they have the skills, time, and interest to contribute. It may require a little bit different orchestration and a different way of allocating and parsing the work, but it's a perfectly capable segment of talent that typically goes under-tapped and underutilized. And then more importantly, when you think about work, you really need to think from perspective of making it a living wage, right? Solange mentioned about the poverty line, and the more we deconstruct and decompose work and outsource a lot of the technical work now to technology, what's left, it's essential work. And it became very obvious how important and difficult it is to replace when there aren't essential workers to do that work. Why is it that essential work is usually the lowest paid too, right? So rethinking the activities and making it easy for somebody to stay with you, as opposed to trying to piecemeal 3-4 jobs so they can have a living wage to have a normal life. So there are a lot of opportunities from analytics perspective. There are a lot of opportunities from talent acquisition practices, and as well as managers' education on how to handle candidate slates that they see and make decision on.
We're asking for a heavy lift, right? It's a heavy lift to look at your organization, to look at the business model, to look at that labor input, and then redesign that. That is a heavy lift. And it's required because that is the source of the structural unemployment. So if we want long-term future to be healthy, organizations need to do that today. But here's a short-term fix. Lower the requirement for an entry-level job, right? You don't necessarily have to, as Stella said, maybe you put college degree optional, or maybe you look at people who have come through a trade school. So we've seen higher enrollments in trade schools went up 19% over 2020, in 2022 over the prior year. And I think it's also because there's better utility, right? So a person who's college bound says, I'm going to spend $40,000 to $100,000+ in my education. And is it worth it? And I think a lot of young people are looking at college, and that's why we see college enrollment going down by about 8%, saying it's not worth spending this amount of money for something that I don't think is going to bring that kind of value in the future. So I think we've got exogenous, external factors, endogenous, internal factors that are all coming together that point to, let's relook at the ante, right? The table stakes for getting a job. And here's the thing that's really, really absurd to me. There's a project that's going on right now at Northwestern University called the Employment Quality Project. And I just had a conversation with one of the people that's there. Stella, can I say her name?
Yeah.
Janitha Gray, who's a researcher in that project. And she told me something really interesting. She told me that for most of the big organizations that are participating in that research, they do not keep information about college education in their HRIS systems. They only use it to screen candidates. And then when you're in the door, these organizations, these big organizations, I'm talking about the Fortune 50, do not keep that information in their systems to use it. And so it's just a way of screening out. It's not even being used by the companies. And it just makes me scratch my head, like, why does it exist at all? If you're not going to track that for your employees, why even use it as a way to screen? And
well, it's crazy. It's crazy, one, that you use this arbitrary measure to screen for things that probably don't even need it as a screening tool.
Right.
And then two, if you are going to use it to screen and you already collect the information, why in the world wouldn't you utilize that information as you're trying to understand and assess the skills of members of your team for future opportunities, et cetera? It really is crazy.
It is crazy. And, the job training industry is an $18 billion industry. Companies are spending $18 billion to train people. So why not let people that don't have a college degree in the door? If you're already going to spend money on training them, have it be, have it have utility, right? So one of the things that we're seeing in our research, and we know when we price out the cost of attrition, that the cost of attrition far outweighs the cost of training and development or the cost of just improving salaries so that you hit at least a minimum wage level, right? I guess the highest minimum wage level, because every state has its own rules. But being penny wise and pound foolish is what most organizations are doing today. They just rather scrimp and save on paying people and replacing those people than simply just giving them a decent wage so that they don't have to have patchwork careers, 3-4 careers or 3-4 jobs just to make ends meet. It's like reinforcing the class system, right? And it's not sustainable. It's not going to work. Companies are dying for employees. Employees are dying for opportunities. And the barrier is something artificial around college education.
And again, that's coming from 3 people that believe in college education, right? I think college education is really important. I think it plays a huge role, but not for every position, and certainly not for every entry-level position. And we already do this to an extent. Like, people get hired all the time for things that they're not particularly traditionally qualified for, because they know somebody, because someone else sees that talent in them. It happens all the time already. And so all we're suggesting is maybe pull back the covers a little bit and make it a little bit more of an open process so people can explore what the possibilities might be for them. And it benefits the individual, but it benefits the organization as well. The fight for talent is real, and it's not going to get easier. And we need to constantly be looking at ways to reskill and upskill our people. Some of that's going to involve credentials, and that's great, but not always. And we need to just be much more proactive in organizations. And maybe the final thing I'll say on this before we start to wrap up, organizations should be reevaluating jobs on a continual basis anyways. So it is a heavy lift, yes, but it's just build it into your normal process of reviewing jobs, job design, redesign, and the whole workflow. And if you start to build that into what you hopefully are already doing, then it's not such a huge, crazy, heavy lift. It just becomes part of the process. And within a couple of years, you will have transformed the way your organization functions in terms of a talent perspective. Well, Stela and Solange, this has been a great conversation. I know at the time, and I do need to let you go, but before we wrap things up for today, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Stela Lupushor. So it's Stela with one L at reframe period work, or find me on LinkedIn, Stela with one L. There aren't that many of us. Solange?
There's only one Solange Charas on LinkedIn, and you can write to me at SCHARAS@hcmoneyball.com. You can find pretty much everything that we're talking about today in our book, which is really a blueprint, a roadmap for helping you to use data analytics to understand your organization and how to improve the effectiveness of human capital programs. And our website for the book is www.humanizinghumancapital.com.
Wonderful. Thank you both. It has been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Stela and Solange can do for you. Check out the book. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations podcast? Enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page. And please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.